So first identifying that, oh, I'm not my ego. I'm not my body. I'm my soul, we'll say, but really we're spirit, and we are a spirit and a soul. Those are two different things for me. So spirit is like the essence, and then the soul is the individual expression of that spirit. And then, we come here, we get a body, and then we have our consciousness. And then within our consciousness is that ego that will attract those experiences for our soul to develop. So that's why, we don't want to kill the ego. We don't want to completely just, burn the whole garden of our mind, because then we're not going to be attracting any experiences to develop. If we're just, sitting, meditating and never being triggered, are we growing? Are we developing? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends on our perception of it, because some people believe, oh, the only way to grow is to suffer. Okay, well, it's the idea, it's the understanding, it's the wisdom, it's the awareness that needs to change, because we can stay in the suffering all we want. So I think that's truly what happens, is we awaken to our true nature and our true understanding, and then we move farther away from those egoic ideas and understandings, and then we're living more of our authentic expression.
To a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast.
Brandi, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Thank you, Boo Boo, so much for being here. I'm excited to be back here at Broaderlands.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to have you on. This is the biggest podcast in Japan right now. So
for real?
No, I was playing.
I'm like, wow, congratulations.
No, maybe we can get started and you kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about your journey, your upbringing, and how, to this point, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. So, just dive right in right now?
Sure. Right now.
Right now. So, I don't actually have like a pre-written bio or anything like that. I'm, like I texted you earlier, I'm an authentic person. This is me. I go with the flow. I live my life. I walk my walk. I talk my talk, so, I consider you a soul friend, and I'm grateful to be here to share, just our conversations. So I think it's pretty cool. But about me, I am from Southern California, and I was born and raised here and lived all over the state. And it's interesting because I always knew that I had a very empathic side to myself, and I always knew that there was more to the life that I was perceiving, I guess I should say, from a very, very young age. And I remember certain experiences that I had in childhood that were just kind of like, I don't want to say otherworldly, or they were just out of the ordinary. I would call them mystical or spiritual experiences. It's interesting because your shirt, what does your shirt say? Can we show everybody? Mystic from the hood. I love that. So I actually grew up in the hood of my area where I'm from. And it's so interesting because people, they look at me and just, not that you can really tell somebody from the hood or not, but people look at me and they're just like, huh? Really? Wait, what? Like, what do you know about anything? But yeah, where I was raised, it was an interesting space, and I was an only child, and so I had a lot. I was very sheltered, and I had a lot of time to be with myself, being an only child and being sheltered, especially being in the area and environment that I was living in. It wasn't necessarily safe, and I was raised in an interracial, family. And so I have a wide culture to me. So it's very interesting because I can identify with so many different walks of life and so many different types of people. And I think that has helped me to really adopt the understanding that we are all one, because there's that common thread throughout every human, throughout every human on this planet. And that's, we all want to be seen, heard, valued, and appreciated in our family, in our communities, in our place of work, whatever that is. And so knowing that there's that basic want and need within everybody, that has helped me to identify with more like compassion and understanding. So, um, I, I also didn't get a chance to really, mm, utilize my spiritual, intuitive, empathic gifts, I like to say. And it wasn't until I got very sick at an older when I was older. So I started having a lot of interesting signs and symptoms, health wise and energetic wise, as a young child. But again, not really knowing what was going on. It was just these weird symptoms, these weird things. Um, I now understand them to be like my gifts and my intuition and my abilities that we all have. But I think that they were basically like repressed or suppressed. I wasn't able to be my authentic self. And that created a lot of trauma in certain ways. Because when we're not living our authentic self, we can start to develop, like self-hatred or self-criticism. And then that turns into that negative self-talk. And then that turns into the negative idea of ourself. And then now we're in this state of being where we could feel like we're trapped because we're against our authentic self. And then we create, this monster mind that we're always fighting against. So it's, we all, every single human, every single soul, we all have a story. And within that story, we have many chapters. We have many aspects and facets that make up us. I do understand that we are multifaceted beings. So I could sit here for the next 25 hours and, talk about all the different multifaceted aspects that make up me. But who I am now is, my business name is the Mindful Rainbow Services, and I have been a mindfulness practitioner for, let's see, professionally for 8 years now. I started a few years before the pandemic, and I actually got to go back to the hood where I grew up and teach mindfulness and mindful practices to the students and the staff at the school that I grew up with. So that was really cool to be like the big girl going back and, talking to the young students and everything. So mindfulness and children, that's one of my passions. I have many passions. I believe that we are here as experiencers for creator or source. And so whatever lights me up, I feel like that's a confirmation from source, like, hey, that's what you're supposed to be doing, because we are co-creating this experience, with something greater than myself. But it's all one. I know that. And so like I was saying, it wasn't until I really, or how should I say, when I started having a lot of like medical and health issues, that's when a lot of my spirituality started to kind of mm, come to the surface or whatever. I don't know, because I understand we're spiritual beings, right? We're spiritual beings having this human experience. So to say like my spirituality kicked in or whatever is kind of silly, but you know what I mean? It's like, I guess maybe like the start of my awakening or my recognition or my understanding, Um, and that led me to a very interesting health journey. And yeah, so we can kind of dive into lots of different things, whenever. But yeah, so I don't know what else to say.
No, it's yeah, I grew up in Pedro, in San Pedro, California,
Mm,
right there, not far. But yeah, they call it the ghetto by the sea. Yeah, I was going to ask you, when did you become aware of the voice in the head, the inner critic? For me, I was so unconscious for a long time. I was so attached to it. I had no state of separation from it. I wasn't aware of it because I was attached to it. You can't see what you can't see, and you don't know what you know because I was fully connected with it. But there came a time somewhere when after my awakening where I started to become more aware, and the more aware of it I became, the more I kind of looked out. I started to develop a healthier sense of self. That inner critic ain't as loud like it used to be. It's not as negative.
Mm-hmm. Um, I can't really pinpoint in this instance right now when that happened, but to answer the best of my ability right now was probably when I think I always had a sense of it, and I could recognize when my authentic expression wasn't there, and it was like that negative part of me was kind of like taking over. I think I was somewhat aware of that my whole life, but I didn't really understand it until it was probably about 9 years ago. A group of mine, a group that I was in with my mentor, his name is Charles. He since has passed now, so he's on the other side. But we went through this experience, and we actually co-authored a book together called The Big E Power. And the E was basically about like the ego. And so I think in another episode that we were in together, Boo Boo, we were talking about how I don't believe that you can kill the ego or sever yourself from that ego. That is a part of us that is here from, you know, that's part of our consciousness in this part, you know, to be this character as Brandi and Boo Boo and whoever. But I believe that when we can but when we can train it, and when we can guide that aspect within us, to be more positive, to be more whatever it is that we are choosing, um, that's really for me when a lot of things opened up. And I started to really work with like the different aspects of shadow work, and looking at those things and those thoughts as, oh, it's not me. I don't truly believe this. I know who I am. I am a spirit, and my thoughts are not me. My body is not me. This experience is not me. So it's more about like detaching from the ideas that we previously held.
Can I ask you what shadow work is for you?
So for me, it's about going into the subconscious mind, and everything that all of our experiences from birth until death, but I'll say from birth until now, um, they've all been recorded, right? We understand like the idea of the Akashic record and things like that, but then in our own individual um storyline here now in this reality, all that is stored in our subconscious mind. And I believe that is where the ego mm, pulls from. And so you can also think of it like the garden of your mind, and you can
I
adopt
love
the
that.
idea of an actual like visual representation of a garden. So sure, I plant those positive affirmations in there, and those can be the flowers, those can be the trees, the things that I'm planting. But then there's also those weeds in there, and those are the negative things that I have planted, all of the thoughts and feelings and emotions that were negative about myself or anyone else, because there's only one garden in my consciousness, and there's only one consciousness. So there's only, one big piece of land, right? There's only one mind, but this is my part, this is your part, this is so and so, we have each a little part, but underneath that, there's all those roots, right? Just like you can look at like, the trees, how there's this symbiotic relationship going on within the trees. And I believe that to be with our consciousness as well. And so, um, I believe that going into the subconscious part of the mind is those things that we repress, the things that we, maybe in our childhood, the things that we go through, the things that are said to us, or the things that we are exposed to that can be scary or negative, or, what have you, those get stored for a certain purpose. And I believe that that is a part of our brain or psyche that wants to protect us, right? And so it's like there's that protective mechanism that kicks in, like, oh, there's an experience that happened in my childhood and this feels so similar to it, so now we're going to kick in fight or flight. Now we're going to kick in, now we're going to go into survival mode. And so I think for a lot of us, when we're going through any traumatic experiences, um, we kind of stuff that, especially as, children or adolescents, because we don't know what to do with those emotions. We don't know what to do with that energy. We don't know how to process it. We don't know how to respond. And then if we are not able to react because it could be harmful, well, what do we do with that? We stuff it. And then that eventually dirties all that garden, because now there's so much negativity in there. So then now, say if I'm trying to manifest something great in my life, something that I want, that's a positive experience, well, that's my life is going to be colored and filtered through whatever's in that garden, whatever's in that subconscious mind. So it's like I have to go in there, and there's so many different processes. Sometimes people call it like timeline therapy or past life regression or different things like that, where you take a look at not only this lifetime, but previous lifetimes, or, alternate realities or dimensions or whatever you want to call it, because to each their own. There's so many ways that, one can access that. But basically going in and finding, maybe like the root cause of an emotion or a thought. And yeah. So anyways, we could talk so much about that, but that's basically about the shadow work is, taking an honest look at the things that we have repressed, and learning and growing from that, evolving from that, accepting, there's a huge part of that is accepting that story that happened, and not just looking at it mm, as what happened, but also taking a look at what was the wisdom that I could take from that on a soul level. Because if I'm here to learn, grow, and develop my soul, then that experience was there for a reason. So that has helped me tremendously to not stay in that victim mentality, of like, and staying so attached to the story. So it's like the ego wants to be attached to that story because that's all the ego knows. The ego is literally living in that subconscious. But me as a higher, as a spirit, I go into my wise mind, and it's like you kind of override that ego. You override that, and you're like, no, this is my garden. I'm going to tend to this garden. I'm going to pull out these weeds, and I'm going to plant these affirmations, and plant these positive things, put this positive energy into this. So then now the ego, which is the energy of that subconscious realm, is now going to pull from more positive experiences and more positive energy. So then in turn, my reality here is going to be more positive and more what I like.
I love that. I think it was Joe Dispenza that once said, um, having a memory without an emotional reaction is
Mm.
called wisdom. And,
I
I
love that.
look
I
at
had
some of
not
the
heard
old
that.
memories. Yeah, some of the old memories and resentments I had, which means to refill, right? Over and over. I was stuck in that for a long time, that karmic loop, and I just stuck in that vicious cycle of thinking, feeling, drinking loop, and I couldn't get out of it for a long time. But when I started to go through the 12 steps, for an example, I started to learn how to look at things differently, and really, like, when I seen how things affected me, I realized, like, that person may be affected by something happened to them, and just having that questioning and understanding started to open the door to forgiveness. um just really, that's why I'm grateful for the 12 step community, is because they taught me how to live principles, not just talk about them, or just like go to some retreat for 3 days, or with a big name there, doing the retreat, but actually live it, and
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I don't suffer, but when you learn how to suffer, you suffer much less. It's just,
Mhm.
it's, and it's not always easy at times, I
Yeah.
still, I always say I don't suffer from alcoholism. I suffer from assholism at times. And I think I told you that before, but it's true, but I have tools today, coping skills
Yeah.
that can
Absolutely.
help me get through the day, teach
Hmm.
me how to suffer, because I'm gonna suffer in this experience regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like, there's quote, know thyself and learn to suffer. And I used to really not like that because it's like, no, I don't want to learn to accept my suffering. I don't want to just accept that because I know that what I allow is what will continue. So no, I'm not going to allow that. But I look at it differently now because the wisdom has taught me that all of that happened for a reason, and it all helped to develop my soul and to help me to kind of train my ego, and so that I can live my authentic self now. And it still takes work. It's not like there's only a couple of questions that you go through and then you're done. No, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of being. It's that true evolving, here while we're still alive. Because I don't believe that, I have to die in order to be reborn and gain all that wisdom. No, I can do that here now without having to, go to the other side and then start all over again. So I feel like I have had so many death and rebirth cycles in my 43 years of life here. And it's like, I'm not done. I still want to keep going because I know that what I do here on this side of the veil is really stacking up all the growth on the other side. It just doesn't feel that way because the ego and the density of it here is like, oh, it's going so slow. There's not much progress. And it's like, no, it is. It is. You just got to keep going.
I appreciate it. And you brought up, when you were talking, you remind me of Ernest Holmes, and I know you eventually found Ernest Holmes on your path,
Yeah.
center of spiritual living. And the Buddha talked about this too, about that field that he called story. The Buddhists call it store consciousness, and whether if we're aware of it or not, we're constantly planting seeds, but we have to take
Yeah.
responsibility of that garden, but as human beings, it seems like a lot of humans, including myself, at a period of time where I don't want to take responsibility for
No.
my life, my actions, and what
Mm-hmm.
I'm planning on a daily basis.
Right.
It's too hard, too much work. But then I suffer because of it. I always say the ego's not your amigo when you're unconscious of it. And it was just running
Absolutely.
wild because I was so unconscious of it.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And I think that's really the key to it is that awareness and that
Man.
recognition, right?
Well,
How did you kind of become aware of your ego, or was that through the 12 steps or after, or how was that for you?
it was for my awakening. When I had my awakening, I had such a profound experience. I was in so much pain where I finally woke up, but I had such a profound experience after my awakening. I had like a lot of my conditioning was not everything, but a lot of it, some of the major stuff that was causing my suffering, um, or that false self, those layers of the persona
Hmm.
that was unhealthy within me were gone from that experience. And that's why I like the word nirvana, because it means to blow out. And some of that blew out. But when that magic candle turned back on, I was in fear and stuff. But anyways,
Yeah.
but when I went to the 12 step community, they taught me to live by the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are nothing but what you can find in centers of spiritual living, or what the Buddhists teach, or what you can find in the core of Christianity,
Hmm.
or any other. They're the same universal principles. So I was just, they taught me how to live those principles. And that's what I'm truly grateful for with the 12 steps, is because it was a way of living. So I actually applied that stuff. And as the time goes by, you start to learn more and more about yourself, who you are and who you're not. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's about that
you know,
self-realization, right?
yeah, self-realization,
Yeah.
which I have a long story. One day I'll tell you about with Yogananda,
Yay.
but,
Cool.
um, this thing called You, that's one of my favorite books by Ernest Holmes. Um,
I love that book.
how
Yeah.
did you find Ernest Holmes and his movement?
So it was in 2015. There was a local, like metaphysical health and wellness fair, and I had heard about it through some mutual friends. I don't know, social media or word of mouth or whatever. I don't know. And I really felt called to go. At that time, I was having a lot of medical issues and a lot of health issues, and I had a cancer scare that actually never fully got diagnosed because after 4 years of them thinking that it was potentially cancer, but they weren't able to biopsy it because of ABC, XYZ. But it was 4 years later, miraculously gone. And so I can't say that I ever actually had a full cancer diagnosis. But anyways, I had a lot of health and medical issues, including that at that time. And so I was really searching and looking for things that could help me. I was recovering from being, I'm not really sure what the word is. I put so much faith in the medical system and Western medical system. And at that point, I was on between 11 and 15 different pills a day. And that
Mm.
was in my 20s and early 30s.
Wow.
And I was a zombie, and I was just going downhill faster than I even want to even remember right now. But anyway, so fast forward 2015, I was recovering from all of that. I wasn't on any medication anymore, but I was having cancer scares. And so this health and wellness fair popped up, and I said, okay, maybe there's got to be something there. So I went there and I loved it. I met a lot of great people, and I met people that were interested in, integrative practices, lots of holistic modalities, and just really cool stuff that was like, wow, all this stuff exists. Like, that was that was the first time that I had ever met anybody else that even knew what Reiki was. Because
Mm.
20 years prior, I had my first Reiki experience, and then I never knew anybody that did it or talked about it, or so it was just like in the back of a closet in my mind. And so I started to meet other people that were like spiritual and woo woo and all of that. But then I never went back to the center. It just went to that wellness fair. Because it just didn't line up. So then 2 years later, they had another one. And I said, all right, I'm going to go back because I think that there's something there for me. And I had already been on my own awakening journey for those couple of years. Because again, with the health journey, you start to find ways that you can help yourself more holistically, yoga, essential oils, meditation, mindfulness, and all of that. So I had already kind of opened the door to those practices. So then in 2017, I went and I actually met a woman from an organization called The Art of Living. And she was teaching breath work.
Mm.
And I remember I walked up to her table and she says, okay, take a deep breath. And I went, and she goes, no, 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 no. Take a deep breath. And so I, superficially, and she goes, no, 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 sit down. And so she grabs my hands and she says, now take a deep breath. And so she guides me, and I can't even get a full breath. My body starts shaking and I start crying. And I start to little hyperventilate. And I'm like, what is going on? And she says, oh dear, you've been holding your breath for so many years. And it was just all that trauma energy just wanting to come out. It's like, it even makes me
Wow.
want to cry right now because you know how there's like the movie and people talk about like waiting to exhale. Like we hold on to so much. I didn't even realize that I was holding on to so much pain and trauma, and that was really, I see now, that was a big part of what those health and medical problems that I was having was. It was all of the energy and the negativity and the trauma and the drama and everything. So because I had met people and because I had met her, I thought, okay, if these people are here, then there must be more. So that was on a Saturday. And the next day on a Sunday, I said, I gotta go. I gotta see what's going on. What are these people about? What are they into? And so, my son was 6 at the time. And we went I had never been to church. When I was younger, but he had never been to church. He had never been to any kind of spiritual center, anything. And I hadn't either really. And I just felt that call from spirit, like there's something here for you. And
Mm.
so my son and I walked in those doors, and yeah, it just completely changed my life. And the minister at the time was Reverend Doug LeBeau. And it's just like I heard what he was saying, and it was like, oh my gosh, these people are thinking the same things that I'm kind of like getting into right now. Like, what is this, And I felt like it was like a little gem of the desert because I had never even heard of Ernest Holmes. I had never heard of religious science or science of mind or anything at that time. So it was just very intriguing to me. And then I started to take classes and started to just kind of dive into what religious science and science of mind was. And then I started working with Centers for Spiritual Living. And yeah, so that's how I gravitated towards that. There's so much more to the story. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that everything is divine synchronicity. So, I can say it was this that brought me there. It was that brought me there. But the story of Brandi on her human journey is that's what happened. But we all know it was just, spirit attracting. It was funny because I had been there for about a year at the local Center for Spiritual Living here where we live. And I would attend every Sunday, like I said, attend their classes, workshops, meetings, gatherings, all the things. And I used to say that it was like a spiritual community, of like-minded people. And sure, we were all on different paths, and there's this little sign in there. It's like wherever you are on your spiritual journey, welcome home, because we're all on a journey and we're never done. So I learned a lot in, taking the classes and everything and adopting the idea of stay open at the top, stay open, you know? So yeah, that's how I came to know Ernest Holmes.
No, I love that. And I told you this before, but one of my favorite sayings is we must find this God in each other and love this God, forgetting all else.
Mm,
And I think that's so beautiful when we really realize God is within ourselves versus
yeah.
outwardly. Yeah, well, what really attracted you to religious science? I mean, what's like the core teachings for some that may not have heard of religious science?
For me, it was taking ownership because I felt
Mm,
like in other religious ideas or well, I guess that would be it. Or religions or whatever. Um there's like an external God. There you have to, pray to something outside of yourself rather than taking ownership and affirming. And so with science of mind, it's we use affirmative prayer. So we are recognizing that God is all there is, that there is only one source, there's only one God, one creator, one spark you know, of creation. There's only one. And that one is in and through all things. And
mm,
there is only one consciousness, one mind. And this mind is the consciousness that directs the energy, which is God. And so because we are each an individual aspect of that mind, then I get to use the power of that mind to create my experience. Um, there's also the idea that, none of this is real, that this is all just a construct of the mind. So I think I gravitated towards like I said, the empowerment of that. Like, oh, I can take ownership of my life and I can direct the flow of my life by my thoughts, my actions, my emotions. And yeah, I think that was really the what I got from the core of it. Hmm.
yeah, I love that. I think the most powerful movements that actually use the Bible is religious science. The centers of spiritual living along with unity.
Hmm.
The Unity Church, they changed the name as well. I forget their
Yeah.
name, but I think those are more empowering versus mainstream Christianity, in my opinion. It just
Yeah.
because it's telling you to go within yourself. You know, like
One of somebody that I met during my time there, they would say that they're a Christian without limits. And I
mm,
always loved that. I loved that because it was like we are unlimited, and it's the Christ consciousness, and there is no limit to that, that there is only one. And so when we can live in that and act from that space, then I think we're doing pretty good. But again, there's
I
that
love that.
ego and that monster mind that is bred from that ego. So that's what we're here to kind of work with.
I think that's why the Buddha said there is no self. Um, because all is the self,
Mhm.
we're all one.
Yeah.
Um, a Buddhist may debate me with that, but that's just my truth. That's how I look at it.
Hmm.
Yeah. No,
Isn't
but
it
I
just
love it.
something
It's
that
funny.
separates us?
Yeah, yeah. No, but what's funny is I think those are very empowering movements. They have a really powerful teachings, but they're the least popular, which is pretty
I know.
interesting.
I know it is. And I actually so I was at the local spiritual center as one of the administrative directors and event coordinators. So I really dived into, service, because what we would say there is, we would talk about our core values. It was, oneness and service and diversity and growth, and, just living by those values, and being a compassionate person who understands that we're all one. I have been in the service industry my whole life, being of service in one way or another. And so um, I loved being able to serve the community there. And one of the things that we wanted to do was, grow. Just grow in our community, meet more like-minded people. And where we are from, here, we're from a small desert town, in Southern California. So it's not a big city where it can be well known, but even in some of the cities, like in LA, like Founders Church and some of the other churches down there, or centers, they call them, now. Ernest Holmes never wanted a church. He never wanted any of that. Um, and so, they call them centers. And it's just interesting how Ernest Holmes started and then now how things are. And I don't think that that's really what he truly would have wanted. Um, because I do see how some of the centers can become like some of those other mega churches. And I think that's kind of what turns people off. So I think it's like a special, like, niche or whatever for people who want to go and have that fellowship, because a lot of people who have that understanding, they don't congregate, they don't do a lot of those things. They're, they understand their oneness and they just practice that within their own lives, rather than going and talking about it with a lot of other people. So there's the idea that, when one teaches to learn, and sometimes when people get to that understanding, they don't need to talk about it anymore. They don't need to teach it. They don't need to go learn about it and read about it. They go and live their life, So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. Some people say that, the Centers for Spiritual Living is dying off. I do know that there's a big movement within Centers for Spiritual Living and the New Thought community. They have something called a Next Gen, and it's for like 18 to 35 ish. And so it's kind of like a young adult, because a lot of the older generations are dying off, and a lot of the younger generations within the Centers for Spiritual Living and Religious Science, a lot of them aren't interested in a lot of the ways and practices that the older generations used to, congregate. So I don't know. I don't know. Things are always changing. So
I think it does need change. The movements need change, both of those
mhm.
movements what I'm talking about, because
Yeah,
sometimes it's such a beautiful message, but I think we need to update it to the reflection of society today. And I think
yeah.
the new people, the younger people will do that, because everything should be a reflection of a society.
Hmm.
Um, I almost laughed right now because I was looking at, on the side right here, there's our images. I made a
Yeah.
goofy face and I just looked at it right now when I was talking.
Oh,
um, but God is greater than religion. How
yeah.
how did you meet Todd, and how did that all blossom into
So I met
being?
Todd at the Center for Spiritual Living here locally. The last 8 years, pretty much everybody that I've met or anything new in the last 8 years has probably come from my time at the spiritual center, because not only was I a member of the community, but I was also one of the lead volunteers, and I was a paid employee. And I was also taking classes. And so I kind of was like, I became like the sweetheart of the place. And so um, during the pandemic, we had also lost our senior minister at that time. He didn't die. He just moved out of state. He and his wife were fully retiring, and so he moved out of state. Anyways, so one of my jobs was hiring and scheduling guest speakers to come and give, the positive, inspiring talks on Sundays, and to do workshops and things like that. And because of the pandemic and our congregation, dwindling down, finances also dwindled. So they would allow some of us to do in-house speaking. And, we weren't getting paid for it, but then the center wasn't having to, pay for it. So it was all good, but it was just part of our service work. And we got to, share our testimonies and share our understandings of new thought. And we could also, practice affirmative prayer and things like that for the congregation. So, one of the times when it was my turn, and so I was doing what we would call like a power talk presentation, and I was speaking, and then I came off the stage, and then I don't know, the choir, we sang a song or something, and then after that, next thing I know, I come walking down the aisle, and some man comes up to me, and he said, and he shakes, he puts his hand out, and he said, "Hi." He says, I'm Todd Michael Jackson, and can I have 5 minutes of your time?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And but because of all my duties and roles and, responsibilities and everything, I kind of had a joke, and I said, "Okay, just, give me 5 minutes." And so I had to go run here, run there. And then, and he waited. And so I came back, and he said, "I really, really liked everything that you had to say up there. It goes in line with, my thoughts and my beliefs. And, I really like everything that you said and the way you said it. And I'm actually, I actually am starting a podcast, and I'm looking for a co-host, and I would like to see if you were interested." And I'm just like, "What?" Because I was literally just like putting it out into the universe and working my little law of attraction manifesting magic. And I was saying that I wanted a platform where I could share more of my thoughts and, just have more of those experiences, because I wasn't a licensed practitioner, and because I was not a licensed minister. I couldn't do that full time in the Centers for Spiritual Living organization. And because I was so involved with that, that was like all that I knew. And I was teaching and speaking in public schools, but I couldn't talk about God, religion, the universe. I couldn't talk about any of that kind of stuff. So it was like I was also working on my throat chakra, and I was like, okay, I am so scared. And, I was scared, but I was like putting it out in there into the universe, because I'm like, okay, God never gives me more than I can handle, right? Like I would just remind like myself of those kind of things, but I'm like, wait, but I'm manifesting it. So anyway, I decided to give it a shot. And I was kind of taken aback, because it was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Like I'm really gonna like do something. And what is it? I think Marianne Williamson says, I don't know, I'm not good with quotes right now, but like our biggest fear isn't that we are inadequate. Our biggest fear is blah, 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 something else. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like, I had this fear of like, what if it all works out? What if it all comes true? What if I can do this? What if this? And I got so scared. And, but anyway, long story short, so we started the podcast, and I was his co-host for a couple of episodes, and then life took some interesting twists and turns, and then we became roommates, and then he was telling me about his idea for wanting to write, this book over so he's a near-death experience researcher, and he was researching, what happens when people temporarily die or cross over, they go to the other side of the veil. And, he was just always interested in that. And so he compiled so much information and wisdom that people who had those experiences firsthand, that they brought back with them. And, so, one thing led to another. We continued our podcast. We were on a local radio station here for a little while. Did some speaking engagement, here a couple times, and people were just like, where can we get more of this? Like, have you ever thought about writing a book, this and that? And he's like, yeah, I want to. I've been like sitting on all this like information, and like I have this call for so long, I want to share this, but I don't know how. And so, like I said, one thing led to another, and then we just made it happen. And so it was March of this year. So we met in June of 22. And then so it was in March of 2025 that the book was published. The first draft was published. And yeah, so we've been spending, the last 6 months or whatever, sharing it and talking about it and, growing. And yeah, so it's been really great to be able to be a part of it, start to finish, in the editing process and the marketing process, the production process, all of that. So yeah, thanks for asking.
One thing I love that you guys talk about is young souls versus old souls. I'd love
Mm-hmm.
for you to touch on that for us.
Well, again, going back to what we were talking about before is that, we are here to learn, grow, and develop. And with the idea of reincarnation, that there's only one soul, right? There's one soul, there's one journey, but we have many different chapters. And so depending on how our soul is developing, that determines the next level of our incarnation. And so, it's really more about like the development, not necessarily about like the age of the soul. So we talk about young and old, but really it's about developed or underdeveloped. Yeah, that's
Mm.
really what it is. Is it more developed or undeveloped?
Do you have any examples what it would look like?
So probably a younger developed soul would be somebody who's living more in their ego. Their ego is taking over, they're probably suffering and struggling in this life a lot. They're probably maybe very violent. They're um
Mm.
maybe sociopathic. Lots of different things because they haven't understood yet. They haven't awoken to the understanding that we are all one. And so what I do to myself, I do to another. What I do to another, I do to myself. We're doing to God, the God within each other. And then somebody who would be more of a developed soul would be more compassionate and more of a like an enlightened being, where they couldn't even fathom harming someone with violence or with their words or even an ill thought towards someone else. So those are just two, extremes of one who would just, have so much violence towards another person and have no remorse. That is a very, very young, undeveloped soul versus, somebody who has the utmost compassion, like the Christ consciousness would be.
You know, you're describing me before my awakening.
Hmm.
That was me. I was violent. I didn't care about the next person. That it was conditioned.
Hmm.
If I'm going to do something for you, you got to do something for me. And I was a very violent person. I would hurt people without caring. But I did care. I mean, I'm not gonna say I was just this completely bad person, but when you turn
Hmm.
that light switch on, I was very violent. I didn't care. They
It's
say
like it wasn't
hurt
stopping
people,
you in
but
that moment or something, right?
yeah, I was
Yeah.
like driven by anger. But when I had my awakening, I found myself more compassionate, more understanding, having these experiences where you're like completely one with everything. Everything just switched. So,
Hmm.
do you think I could have been a young soul transitioning into an old soul, or I don't know, just but what you described as a young soul, um, and as an old soul describes me before and after my awakening.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just pretty interesting
Um,
to think about.
Yeah, I think because look at how much you developed through your awakening, And
Mm,
so I understand that it's however wherever we are in our like soul development when we cross over for the last time in this timeline, that's going to we kind of like start from that point in the next one as far as our soul journey. But then we also have free
mm.
will, right? And so it's like you can take 5, 10, a million lifetimes to develop. It's up to yours. The choice is yours. And so, um, first identifying that, oh, I'm not my ego, I'm not my body, I'm my soul. will say, but really we're spirit, and we are a spirit and a soul. Those are two different things for me. So spirit is like the essence, and then the soul is the individual expression of that spirit. And then, we come here, we get a body, and then we have our consciousness. And then within our consciousness is that ego that will attract those experiences for our soul to develop. So that's why, we don't want to kill the ego. We don't want to completely just, burn the whole garden of our mind, because then we're not going to be attracting any experiences to develop. If we're just, sitting, meditating and never being triggered, are we growing? Are we developing? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends on our perception of it, because some people believe, oh, the only way to grow is to suffer. Okay, well, it's the idea, it's the understanding, it's the wisdom, it's the awareness that needs to change, because we can stay in the suffering all we want. So I think that's truly what happens, is we awaken to our true nature and our true understanding, and then we move farther away from those egoic ideas and understandings, and then we're living more of our authentic expression. And so we are growing and developing at such a rapid rate than we were before, because in the suffering we're still growing, but we're keeping ourselves kind of stuck in that because of our free will and our lack of awareness and understanding. But when we truly wake up, like that acceptance is like, oh, I accept that this is where I'm at. I accept that this is what happened. I accept that this is part of my story. It was here for me to grow. Okay, let me see what that wisdom is. Let me get that understanding so I can have that wisdom to carry with me to the next journey, whether that's just a new chapter here, a new relationship here, or a whole new life and a whole new paradigm. And speaking on the paradigms is you had a shift in your paradigm. Your whole paradigm shifted when you awakened. And so the more we go through those paradigm shifting experiences, that's showing us that we're growing and evolving.
What do you think is the purpose for a human being, for us being humans, for the individual and as a collective? Is it just to experience, grow, expand?
I believe that. I definitely believe that. I believe that we are here to have experiences. I tell my 14-year-old that all the time, we're not here to just sleep. We're not here to just be lazy. We're not here to, it's like, we're here to meet each other. We're here to connect with each other, because, there's this song like, God needs us to shine its light. And the light that we shine is God, right? That's the energy and essence, but the how it shows up, that's on us. So we can have, the divine light show up dirty and murky and muddy and caca, right? It could be nasty. That's how it's showing up when the ego is trying to, the unhealed, the untrained ego. And especially if we go through trauma or drama or, violence or anything like that, that will breed more of that into that ego. And then we're going to, put more of that light out into the world. Or we look at when we awaken, when we train the ego, when we clean up that garden, when we, really take a look at our thoughts and our experiences and we change those, then now we are actually shining a clearer light, a better light, a brighter light into the world of love, compassion, unity, oneness, harmony, all of those beautiful things that is the vibration of heaven. That is the vibration of love. That is the vibration of, of creation. And so the more we can live in that, I do believe we are shifting that for the whole collective.
Hmm.
So I kind of feel like
So,
it's our duty to be that love. It's our duty and our role and responsibility to do our best to be that. And that's challenging. It's challenging, to, how they say like knowing's half the battle. Okay, well, but if you know better and you don't do better, then really you're just continuing your own suffering. But if you know better and you do better, then you're evolving and growing, not just for yourself, but all those around you. So yeah, I think that's kind of what helps to drive me, is that I'm doing this not only for myself, but for the aspect, of God that is within all.
Mm.
Yeah.
You hear people say, well, how can God let this happen?
Mm.
Why is God letting all these people, poor people be, or homeless people or whatever? But the real question is, why are we allowing that?
Mhm.
That
Well,
just
there's
came to
the
mind
saying,
right now.
what you allow is what will continue. Um,
Mm,
it's hard. It's hard because, we can look at the suffering of other people and we can want to change it. We can want better. And I think it's a fine line because,
yeah.
I think even in the book, Todd had said, do you even want Jesus to take away your sins? Because a sin is just you're missing that mark. And so you're not developing, because when we hit that bullseye, then it's like, oh, I hit my target. I'm progressing, Um, you have that wisdom, that understanding, and you're hitting that mark, you're on target. And so, um, I don't want to take away the suffering of the world. I want it to be lessened. I want people to understand what they're doing. Um, but at the same time, how will those souls that are involved in that cycle, how will they learn? How will they learn? Because it's the idea is that we learn through firsthand knowledge of our own experience. Well, if we deny that experience for somebody else, then how are they developing? So it's very tricky to get into that idea of thinking, because I don't want people to suffer, but I want their soul to evolve and grow through that. So how do you do that without that suffering? I think it's suffering when you don't realize why it's happening to you, or you don't realize that this is for your highest and best and your greatest good. And I think that's why, like in the New Thought metaphysical community, we say this is for my highest and best. Even this bad thing that's happening, it's happening for a reason and a purpose, because it's clearing out that negative energy, it's clearing out that karma, it's creating more balance and harmony, even though it may not look like it right now. I think of it like when a forest burns down. I used to be so sad, and I would be just like so empathically just like crying, because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much destruction. But then I had to really realize that from that, more growth is coming. That those old trees have to be burned out, in a sense. That's that natural deforestation or whatever, from the earth. That's just the natural cycles that it goes through. So same thing like humanity, there's those natural cycles. But we can keep ourselves in a state of suffering longer, by our understanding of it. So I think the more people can realize and recognize that they do have a choice, they can continue to allow that suffering for themselves, or they can recognize it sooner rather than later and get themselves out of it. Um, but I know it's not always easy. I mean, uh, depending on the topic of the situation, you know what I mean? It's like it's a case by case kind of situation. So
No, you're right. It's a fine line. I think
yeah.
the Buddhists would talk about how impermanence is a principle of harmony. Everything has its seasons. We're
Mhm.
going to die. But we live in a system that's creating a lot of suffering. And that's the hard part,
Yes.
watching what's going on in the world. And it's like, you know, but I think we
I
also
know.
got to learn at a collective level as well, like just like the individual.
Yes. Yes, and that's the hard part. It's almost like, I remember there was this story of like this little girl, and she kept wanting to throw all the starfish back into the ocean or something, into the sea, and she kept like more and more just kept coming up onto the shore, and she kept throwing them back, throwing them back, throwing them back, and she felt so overwhelmed
Mm.
because she's like, I can't save them all. What am I going to do? And it's like we can't save each and every individual, because this is bigger than us. This is bigger than any one individual, because everything truly is unfolding in divine purpose and divine right action. And I know that some people don't like when I or other people say that, because they're like, well, then you're just accepting all the suffering. It's like, but again, those trees had to burn. there was a reason and a purpose why those particular trees burned down and some of the other ones didn't. There's a particular reason why some of those souls have incarnated into that suffering cycle, because that soul needs to learn that. So, truly, there, on a human level, there's victimhood. But on a soul and a higher consciousness, there's only people playing their character roles. Because outside of these bodies, there is no suffering. There is no struggle. There's only the idea of it here because we can feel it and we can think about it. But outside of feeling and thinking about it, it doesn't exist. There's only the story playing out. So that's why for me, I do my best to not get caught up in it anymore. I used to get very, very caught up in it and so sad about the suffering. It doesn't mean that I don't care. Please know that. It doesn't mean that I don't have compassion, but I also understand that and trust and know that there's a reason and a purpose for it happening. And I pray for ease and grace, and I pray for the highest and best for all involved, for whatever lessons that need to be learned as quickly as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you too. In this play of duality, some got to play
Yeah.
different roles. Some's got to be the villain for the
Yep.
other person. We need that
Yeah,
in order to
exactly.
expand and grow and contract and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Robert, the boy wonder on augmented teachings. How'd you guys come
Yeah.
up? How'd you guys meet Robert and House of Frog?
So, through the spiritual center again, being the event coordinator and the director and everything, Robert and Cinnamon, they came to the spiritual center and they wanted to, book one of the rooms there to have a breathwork, meditation, and movement night. And I was like, okay, cool. Sure. I'll do the paperwork. I'll sign you up. Cool. And then I went because it was interesting to me, and it was my job to open and close the night, And so I participated, and holy wow. Oh my gosh, it was exactly what I was looking for. It was exactly what I needed. Just like when I went to that health and wellness fair, 7 years prior, and I met the lady from Art of Living, and she helped me with breathwork. And which, by the way, I did go there for several breathwork classes, and took different courses and stuff with the Art of Living. But I was more gravitated towards the science of mind at that time, and then because I was my service work and my employment work, But that's how we met. And then they were opening up their wellness studio at their home. And so I started going to classes there. And then one thing led to another. And then we all became friends. And then I don't know, I invited them over to meet Todd. And then they finally met him. And then just based off of our conversations when we were hanging out and just having our little chill times and, or whatever we were doing, just the guys, we would have such great conversations. And so we decided, okay, you know what, let's just have a third guest on our show. And so, we've done several podcasts with Robert and Cinnamon from House of Frog. And again, they are my soul family. They are my oikos, as they talk about, and we understand that, we signed up. We all signed up to meet each other again. So there's no mistakes or coincidence. And it's really cool. So yeah, we love our House of Frog people, and they definitely walk the walk and talk the talk. And I personally go to their classes and their workshops, and I've actually got to co-host some events there at House of Frog, and we do our sweat lodge ceremonies, and I bring my drums, and sometimes we'll do some Tai Chi mindful movement, which is what I practice and share with people, and all of our essential oils and all that stuff. So all the health and wellness and woo woo and meditation and all that stuff we get to do together. So it's cool because again, I love community. I love doing things together. I can do all of these things sitting in a closet by myself. And I do sometimes, but I know that I'm here to experience with others and to meet the God within others and have, a more elevated experience. So any opportunity I get to do that with others, I try to take it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to ask you one important question. I have a friend who's a Christian and he has a hard time. He doesn't know how to forgive people. I'm like,
Mm.
well, how do you practice forgiveness?
Well, I have been given a huge dose in that quite recently in the last 6 months. So it's interesting that you shared that. So, as we know, forgiveness is only for us. It's not for the other person. It's only for us because we are holding and harboring that energy of resentment or victim mentality, or that we're hurt, or any of that. And, because we are multidimensional, multifaceted beings, it's, it is totally possible to hold love and resentment at the same time. People talk about we can't be in love and fear at the same time. Okay, well, I don't know. I know me, and I know what I can hold, and I know exactly where I am. So I say
I
I
love
can.
that.
I say that I can. Talk to my therapist. No.
That's
um,
awesome.
and so, so sometimes there are ways that we can do like a spiritual bypass, and we can say, oh, but I love this person, and I accept and I forgive, and this and this and that. But is that just on a superficial level? What about internally? How do we really feel? And that's part of that shadow work, is really identifying and recognizing how we really feel about it, because how we feel is an indicator of what our belief system is inside. So, forgiveness. Forgiveness is really first all about acceptance. And I know for time purposes, I'm not going to go too far into it because I could talk forever, but going through the steps and the stages of forgiveness has been, like I said, acceptance and getting into gratitude. Gratitude is a huge, huge part of acceptance and forgiveness, because I am grateful that this person signed up to be the villain in my story so that I can learn, grow, and develop. But that is because I am conscious, I am aware, and I am willing to work that shadow aspect, to work that ego, to work that soul development. Because I already declared a long time ago, at the beginning of my, awakening, was that I'm on the fast track to learning. This was before I even understood about soul development and, growth and karma and samskara and all of that. It was just like this innate, like, feeling at the beginning of this is like, okay, you know, I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn. I'm going to develop. Like, there's something to this. I'm going to keep going and going and going. And then when I got to the part of like forgiving, I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to forgive. And that was one of my hardest things to overcome. And I'm still working on it. And like I said, the past 6 months have been huge. And I also know that through my awakening and health journey, I recognize where I was holding a lot of unforgiveness, because I was holding a lot of energy that, like, in acceptance. I don't know what the word would be. But where I didn't accept the story, I didn't fully surrender to the character and all the roles and all of the experiences that me as Brandi have had so far. So, yeah. Yeah, it really feels good when you free yourself through forgiveness, because um then I am no longer held back from my growth. And now I can attract and get to live better and greater experiences without all the muck, dirtying my reality. So,
I love that. And with that deep understanding, you can give that person a Grammy for playing such a great role to help you
I
evolve.
know. I know. I know. Without getting into the story, but I actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had a pretty grand expression. So I got to work with Marianne Williamson at like a 14-hour event that she had. We had almost 500 people
My Marianne?
come. Huh?
My Marianne?
Yes, you're Marianne. Yes, yes.
We broke
um,
up.
I know, I know. She told me, she told all of us. No. But I got to receive the first rose off of the stage from her flowers that were on the stage, and she was traveling the next day, so she couldn't take them with her. And so I asked her, I said, well, could I have a single rose? And she's like, oh, you can take them all. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I just want one. And for some reason, that rose, I didn't understand what the next day was going to bring. I had no idea. And so when we talk about being open to miracles and expecting the miracles, a miracle is is a blessing that we weren't expecting, that we didn't even know was even possible. So I had been harboring some unforgiveness for quite some time with somebody in my life. And so I got this rose, and I loved it. And it was just such a beautiful representation of the amazing experience that I had, the heart opening, the heart deepening, the expansion that I had working with Marianne that day. So the next morning, I woke up and the sun was just shining like super, super extra that morning. Like, it was like, what is this? Like, I felt so different. And some certain events happened, and I felt a call from spirit. And I grabbed that rose. I got in my car. I drove somewhere, and it was a public place. And so I walked in, and there was one individual there that spirit was like, this belongs to them. And so I walked up to her and I gave her the rose, and I spoke my piece, and we shared love and a hug. And that was one of the most empowering acts of forgiveness that I never, ever, ever thought that I would even get to. And yeah, so thank you for letting me kind of digest that a little bit, because I thought I had done some forgiveness work internally, but there was a part of me that needed that external representation.
Hmm.
And I can say that that was not from my ego. That was not an egoic move. That was straight from my spirit. It was like my
Hmm.
spirit was driving my body and my mind and driving the ego in that moment. And I even had this little thought for a second of like, what am I doing? I'm literally going to just show up over there and just like, what am I even going to say? What am I going to do? And it didn't matter. Didn't matter. I accepted, and
Hmm.
I felt like so ignited in that moment. And it was like something inside of me just like was bursting through. I still haven't fully processed it. But it feels really good. And I feel like so much of my life is just opening up after that act of forgiveness. So yeah,
I love that.
thanks for letting me
No, I
share.
love that. Thank you for sharing it. Marianne once said, "A miracle is a shift in perception from fear to love." And I love that. But we get so caught up in these spiritual circus and these names and fame and all this, but we forget about just applying this stuff. And I think that was a really
Yes.
powerful experience that you shared with us. So I really appreciate it, because going to retreats are cool and stuff, but
Yeah.
what happens after you're away from that retreat? Are you actually living this
Yes.
stuff? Are you applying it, utilizing it? And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I think we forget that at times in the spiritual
Yeah.
community.
Well, and it's like,
N-
what drives us, you know?
yeah.
Is it the outward circus, or is it the actual work,
Mm.
you know? Because we don't get to take anything with us when we die. We don't get to take the houses, the cars, the money, the plaques, the likes, the awards. We don't take any of that with us. We take the wisdom, the feeling, the experience, that's what we take back home with us. So we can't always be so consumed in the material world. Sure, we have to. What is that? Be in the world but not of it, or
Of it,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah. So for
You
me,
know,
that kind of be there and observe, but don't absorb. Don't absorb all of the ego from this world.
I love that. It's a perfect spot to end. And here's my last question for you. What do you believe happens to us when we die?
um I think it depends on, I think my answer would depend on my state of consciousness at that time. If I'm
Mm.
happy or pissed off. No, I'm just kidding. No, I do believe that the soul continues on to the next stage of evolution.
Mm.
Like I said, I do believe that there is only one life and we get to live many chapters in that. So I can't claim to know exactly what each stage looks like because I have not fully awakened to that. Because if I did, I don't think I'd be having this conversation. I think I would be somewhere else, developmentally and in my consciousness. So I'm so grateful that we've linked up and that we've found our way here. But yeah, I know that the soul carries on. Yeah, the soul carries on.
So when you say we only have one life, can you expand on that a little bit? You meaning that we have one life, we are life itself with multiple experiences? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that would be a great
Okay.
way to put it. Yes, yes, yes. Because I think of it like, each incarnation is, we could say, like a chapter in the life story.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's like, some people say, oh, in this life or in the next life. Well, there's only one life. There's one, just evolution. I think of that as life. And then there's all these different little chapters and segments that we get to go through, these different stages where we get to play different character roles to help develop our soul and to experience for life.
I love that. I think Muji once said, you don't have a life, you are life itself.
Hmm.
And I love
Yeah.
that. Do you
Yeah.
think the Akashic records, do you think that's like the memory of God?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. But I also know that we can go in and change those records by changing our perception and our understanding of that. And I do believe that that is how I have developed my soul a lot in the last maybe 10 years, is going through that shadow work, going into the Akashic record, going into, the Hall of Records, into the mind of God, basically, and the memory of God, and taking a look at what's there and kind of shifting things up a little bit because of our perspectives.
I
And
lo-
then from that, that's how we get to manifest differently. That's how we get to live different experiences, is because we are, in a sense, changing those records.
I love that. I think that's the greatest teaching I've ever learned in spirituality is how to change your perspective and, your perception. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I never knew how to do that before. And so,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks
We
for
just
coming
keep
on.
going. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much
I
for having me. I know we could talk like forever. Um, yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I look forward to catching up again.
Yeah. I'm going to end it with Wayne Dyer. My beliefs are that the truth is the truth until you organize it, and then it becomes a lie. I don't think that Jesus was teaching Christianity. Jesus was teaching kindness, love, and concern and peace. What I tell people is don't be a Christian, be Christ-like. Don't be a Buddhist, be Buddha-like. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you shared that. I love it. I'm going to look that up or send it to
No
me so I
problem.
can read that and digest that a little bit. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on Broader Lens. And yeah, I'll check you later.
Thank you. Namastizzle.
Okay. You too. Bye, my friend.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.